Hello, my name is John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people that are watching us from around the world, they say, okay, we know where Canada is. In British Columbia on the west coast, right? Right. Beautiful, beautiful country, very busy province. So today we got a very interesting guest on our podcast. Her name is Segal. Ina is a world-renowned pioneer in energy medicine, and that'd be interesting to find out about, and a human consciousness, and the best-selling author of The Secret Language of Your Body, extremely popular, over 1 million copies sold, and has been translated in 26 languages around the world. And so her work has been praised by leading physicians and thought leaders alike for bridging science and spiritual in a way that is both practical and profoundly transformative. Ina, very interesting. Tell us about you, a little bit about your background. I know your grandparents were born in Belarus, and you are in Australia now, or in the United States? Where are you?
Australia. I'm in Australia, in also, a nice warm place in Australia.
Yes.
And it's beautiful. But yeah, I was born in Belarus, and at the time, my personal story kind of connects to my grandparents in a way. My grandparents went through the war, as I know I've heard you talk about.
Yes.
And when people go through the war, it's extremely traumatic, and there's also something they couldn't talk. Yeah. And for my grandparents living in a country that was, socialist, they could not talk about it. So they suppressed everything. They for 50 years, they whispered about what happened to them.
PTSD.
And and when I was born, I started having digestive issues, and nobody could really work out what I was having and what I was going through. And then we left Belarus when I was 9, and we we were on our way to the US, but ended up in Australia.
How did that happen? Did you go the wrong way around the world? Rather than going this way, you went that
way. Well, we ended up going to Italy because you had to kind of immigrate. And in Italy, you had to go through a whole system. And so when we were going to the US, we were rejected. So I think they had their limit at the time.
So that was after the Second World War. I presume that you probably were talking about the 1950s. And then Belarus was under control of the Russian Communist Party. Khrushchev was in power, maybe. And so it was quite suppressive. So it came through the war years, was affected adversely again by the Germans that had invaded it and had it under control. Poland, Belarus, and the whole eastern Romania, and all of it was under control. And then the fight ended virtually, when the Germans decided to take over or invade Russia in 42 or 43, and then it kind of the battle in Leningrad pushed the Germans back and all the way back into Germany, and then the end came in 1945, early 1945, when the Germans capitulated to the invading or to the Allied forces, including the Russians. And then Russia took control over East Germany, Berlin eastward, and the Allied forces or the now NATO forces took over the west of Germany and all the other countries, but for a long time thereafter, and it was under all those other Eastern countries were under the control of the Russian and the Communist Party.
Yeah, and so nobody could actually leave or do anything. I think there was a little time when I was just born in kind of around the 1980s that people could leave for a short period of time, and my mum's a lot of relatives left to the US, and then the door was shut and it opened with Gorbachev in about 89, 88, I think.
Yeah.
And we left Belarus in 89. And yeah, so we were on our way to the US and we were in Italy. And yeah, we were told that we couldn't go to the US. There was no real explanation except that I think they had quotas, and I think we probably were, not in that quota at the time to go.
Yeah.
And my parents had a friend in Australia, so they called them, and this friend sponsored us to come to Australia, originally to Melbourne, and now I live in Brisbane.
Yeah.
So
Australia is a big, big country, beautiful country, but it's a long way away from Belarus, that's for sure.
yeah, pretty much as further away as you can get.
So the other part about it is interesting. Just for our guest watching, a lot of stuff happened, around Eastern Europe, and Belarus even still today is in the middle of it all and under control virtually by the Russians and Putin now. And then the other part that happened is, as some of these countries liberated more, one was Romania, actually in 1989, when they had a dictator that had been there, Ceausescu, I believe was his name or so, that was liberated, and he was taken together with his wife, and they were executed or sent a death sentence. And so, but since that time, Romania has been free, to a certain extent Hungary and the other countries of the Russian Empire have all somewhat been independent, but the Russians are trying to take more and more of the control back if they can. Hence the fight that we now have in the Ukraine, which is extremely unfortunate, but Belarus is right. Is it south of it, southwest of it? I believe
in the western directions.
Yeah, okay. So that's
what I'm going to say. Yeah, I think what I'm going to say is that what's really sad about the whole situation is that when I was there, obviously I was only 9.
Yeah.
But it felt like we were all kind of connected and kind of like cousins. So Ukraine is quite close to Belarus, and so was
right next to it, right?
Russia and Poland, and we just felt like we loved each other, like we were one of the same. And now the fact that people are hating each other and fighting against each other and family against family almost, it is extremely, extremely sad.
Yeah, it is.
I'm just going to, wanted to say that because
it
was never like this when I was there.
No. And it's a good discussion to have, because when we know, I was born in Holland, and obviously I followed all of this closely because we were involved in the Second World War. I was born in 1940. We were liberated by the Canadian Army as part of the Allied forces on April the 12th, 1945. And I was 5 years old. It made such an impression on me that I knew that once I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And I did. And I love Canada. And then I wanted to build a lumber mill, and all the trees are in British Columbia on the West Coast. And so that's where I wanted to go, and that's where I am today, 60 years later, here in northern British Columbia. I call it paradise.
Beautiful.
And as you do, and as I do, and you do from your parents and your grandparents, that with all due respect to all our friends around the world that have not been exposed to war and all the challenges around it, is that some people think that war is over and everything goes back to normal. It doesn't. It may take generations. And like for me, as a 5-year-old, saw far too much that we should not have seen, still have PTSD, but still get counseling in my 50s for the inner child, all because of seeing and being affected by all the challenges and all the difficulty and trauma of war. And so it always stayed with me and still is very much with me still even today. And, so yeah, very much so. So let's go a little bit further about you then in Australia. And then you had a lot of challenges as well in with pain, emotional struggles, and and other challenges that you had in your life, even at a very young age.
Yeah, so, I think, as I was saying, it started with digestive issues. Then started having, when I came to Australia, actually, psoriasis all over my elbows and arms and knees, which also my grandfather had and my dad.
What is it?
And
What is it, Ina? Psoriasis.
So you start to have it's kind of like a rash,
Okay.
skin rash, but it becomes hardened, so it's very itchy.
Okay.
And it's it's very uncomfortable. So you kind of, it depends on the people, you start to have little spots, and then it goes into this kind of hardened, red, irritated area that can look very raw.
Okay.
So that, quite unpleasant. And then when I was about 14 to 15, I started getting back pain, just little tinges that by the time I was 19 and 20, I was in agony a lot of the time and found it very difficult to walk, especially lower back pain. And essentially, I went to everyone, starting from, doctors, physiotherapists, chiropractors, and whoever else, massage, anything I could find, naturopaths for skin issues. And my experience was, I'm going to say, is that I would go with the attitude that I'd been taught, which is I know nothing about my body, but the doctor or the medical professional, whoever it was, the professional, knew everything. And I just would take medicine or follow whatever I was told. And for me, it just wasn't working, let's just say. And I had this moment that changed everything where, just to put it into context, I had an experience of having a child so I got pregnant when I was really young, when I was 19, and the child died. And this kind of
stillborn, right?
Stillborn, yeah, but at pretty much 8.5 months. So it was something I didn't actually know existed in Australia. So, and not from people my age. And so it created this explosion of pain in my body to the degree that is hard to put into context, except, my grandmother, as I was talking to her after it happened, she'd lost 7 of her brothers and sisters and her mother during the war. And so I guess you would relate to that as well. And the trauma, of that loss, I felt like her and I really started to connect and understand each other. I mean, she did, call me in tears and say, I wish she wished it was her that, had died instead of this child, which was, very kind of
Very
emotional to hear as well. And this is also when she started actually talking and sharing about what happened to her. Up until that, I didn't actually know much. But that trauma, which I felt was both from what I experienced and my grandmother,
brought you together.
just, kind of exploded, I felt, in my whole nervous system. So I was in pain all the time, pretty much.
Yeah.
And, and not wanting to leave, like not wanting to be here because I had not come, in touch with death before that. And it was a sense of like, I am not meant to lose a child. Like that doesn't make any sense.
No.
And so I was not doing well emotionally or physically. And I was seeing this chiropractor, and I'd been seeing him for probably around a year. And he, and several months after this happened, and he was saying, he was trying to help me. I was seeing him 3 times a week. But the more, I guess, as I was going forward after this experience, I was not coping very well with life. And when I got to him one of the days where I felt was life-changing for both of us in some ways, well, for me, essentially, but for him, in saying this to me, he, I was in agony. I was twisted. Like my body could not move. So I could only look one way, and I was in pain. If I was standing, sitting, lying, didn't matter what. And when I got to his office, he looked at me and he just said, "Hey, like your body's really stuck." And I said, "Yeah, I know that. What can you do to help me?" And I think he had to make a decision from some internal wisdom in himself. And he just said, it's like, you want to be stuck. Your body wants to be stuck. I cannot help you. And he just said to me, go home. Now you have to kind of get a sense. When I got there, I was very depressed, and I could hardly move. I had no energy. I was in agony. On the way out of his office, I was enraged. I was so angry that he would say this to me, and how could he say it to me? But as I was going home, something in me went, I'm going to heal myself. I cannot keep doing this. My whole life is going by, and I'm just not getting better. I'm not getting better. And so I went home, and I didn't know what I was doing, but I thought, I'm going to start with just essentially placing my hands on my back just to support it. And then I realized that I was breathing extremely, extremely shallowly because I was trying not to feel pain. So I started breathing with the pain. And then I started counting backwards from 30 because my mind was very negative. And at that point, something happened, which was kind of a challenge for me, because I have to say, and I know my grandfather in particular felt this, that once I had this child that died, I didn't know if I could believe in God at that point. It was like I felt like I had faith in some way, and then it was quite shattered for me. And so I did ask, I said, if there is something divine, and I don't know, I didn't know if I can believe in it. I just want help now, And I felt this warmth move through my body, and I thought to myself, okay, something's happening. My eyes were closed, but I can tell you it felt like sunlight, like this golden light was pouring into my body. And I thought, that's interesting. And then this thought came into my head that I'd never had before, ever. And the thought was, I wonder if I could see into my back, what it would look like. I did not expect anything to happen, but within about a minute, it felt like somebody switched, like this switch on, And I could literally, it was like doing an x-ray. I could see my spine. I could see exactly where the inflammation was, what it was doing. I got a fright, I'm going to say. But I also went, why? Why do I have this? Like, where does this come from? Again, not expecting anything, but also not from a victim place. And I started getting these images and memories. I'm going to say there was a combination of memory and insight. And it started with the fact that when I came to Australia, I did not know one word of English. And being from Eastern Europe, Belarus, in Australia, and being a child was not a good thing. I was bullied, I was attacked, people would throw things kids would throw things at me. Nobody would talk to me, I was ignored, and I didn't really know how to be myself or be in my own skin, essentially. And this is when the psoriasis started for me.
Again?
After not long after.
Oh,
Well, this is when it started.
it really started. Yeah. Yeah, so you were only still
And
9, 10, 11 years old. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
And then I just felt like my parents found it very, on one hand, they found freedom, right? Freedom in Australia to be themselves. But on the other hand, they were really struggling with money. They were struggling with being in a new country, with a new culture, but they could speak freely. And so they loved that part of it. And they felt more, in a way, more accepted than they were in Russia, Belarus, because they weren't.
So they were speaking, what are they speaking in Belarus? Is it Russian, or is it Russian and a mixture? Is there, because Romania is different, Hungary is somewhat different, so where does the Belarus fit in? And next is Poland, and then the Ukraine.
Yeah.
The Ukrainians speak Russians on the east side, I believe, but Ukrainian on its own is a language in the same grouping of languages. Where does the Belarus language fit in?
Well, we did have Belarusian, but it was like, so you spoke Russian, everybody spoke Russian. And then at school, you would have, I think lessons maybe a couple of times a week where you'd learn Belarusian, but when I was there, nobody spoke it. It was more something you learned at school, as opposed to actually having communication with anyone. So I think, for my parents more, it was the fact that you always had to think about what you say, because my mum was born, or both of them were born in 1956, so not that far after the war.
Right.
And there was still that sense of you have to really think before you speak.
Yeah.
You cannot just say whatever you want to say.
No.
And so, for them, being in Australia was this, like, oh my God, we can be ourselves. Freedom, yeah. We can speak. Whereas for me,
but
it was
they would be speaking,
a little bit more.
They would be speaking Belarusian or Russian together at home, I presume.
Russian, yeah. They would speak Russian at home, and they had a lot of friends who were, who came
also
from
Russian,
Ukraine, Russia, wherever, because we didn't have that distinction at the time. It was like everyone was from the USSR, so to speak.
Yeah.
And so I guess coming back to my own experience, I felt like, my parents and their own struggles, especially with finances, which puts massive pressure on the family, was something I also absorbed. And I feel like your back is so much about support. And I felt that it was hard for me, in my growing up, with my parents constantly stressing about money, having fights, and also they ended up, because they wanted me to do really well, so they ended up taking me to quite a prestigious school, and that was and that cost a lot of money, but that gave them this massive discount. Everybody from Eastern Europe got a discount going to this school. But what the issue was that I'd never seen people who were insanely wealthy and grew up with, like living in palaces almost, whereas I grew up in the same room with my brother, you know, and always got kind of going, how do we save money? How do we not spend anything? And so now I was this person, this is in high school, from Eastern Europe, to them it was Russia, who had no money, who they could attack now for both of those aspects, and my friends as well. And so we all kind of, I thought about it later on, my friends, a lot of my friends got scoliosis, and they'd walk around like this because we would walk around trying to self-protect. And even the teachers, I mean, it was crazy. Like, I was extremely good at English, and so have some of my friends, but we never got more than a C plus. And at one point, my friend's parents went to the teacher and said, "What is this? This is ridiculous. These girls are really, they're really good at English and they're good at writing. Why do you give them C plus?" And the teacher said, "But they're not Australians. I can't give them, a better mark than that. They came from another country, and I don't give it to the Australians." So there was a lot of that going on, and I feel that I absorbed this and felt extremely unsupported, but couldn't really talk about it because my parents were like, "You should be grateful that we're paying for you and you get these opportunities that we didn't have." And so, I felt like my physical body, I was always tense. I was always in that self-protect mode. And then I also realized, as I mentioned at the beginning, I had a lot of digestive issues. And the loss of this child exploded these digestive issues as well as my back pain. But it's like I could hardly eat. I would just my body would not be able to handle a lot of food. And, I would feel sick all the time. And I realized that it kind of started with my grandparents and the loss that they had that they'd never processed. And then, when I had a loss that wasn't, anywhere near what my grandmother went through, but still, it was very traumatic.
For
It
you.
was, all of this kind of, my whole body just started falling apart.
Exactly.
And what was really interesting for me was that in that realization, I allowed myself to really feel and cry and understand. And I fell asleep because I wasn't sleeping as well. I was in pain all the time. And so the first time in years, I had the most amazing sleep. And when I woke up, it was like my body had unwound. That's what it felt like. It literally unwound. And I still had pain. I'm not going to say I had no pain, but it was down 70%. So I only had 30% of pain. And I thought to myself, oh my God, maybe this body does have wisdom and language. Let me keep exploring for the next few weeks at least and just really focus because I really want to be well.
So
And by the end of about
that happened when you got this sunshine somehow happened, and all of a sudden you saw your body in your mind and you could feel it, and all of a sudden things started to change physically for you, that all of a sudden all the pain that you had before was starting to disappear to 30% of what it was before. It was not fixed, but you were going into a new direction that send you a signal. So how old were you then? Were you then in your later
I was
teens?
20, no,
27?
when this happened, I was I was 21.
21, yeah, okay. Yeah, there was a year after your baby, unfortunately, was stillborn, and you were 20 then. And then when you had the encounter with your uh, dog and and he basically said, I can't do nothing for you. That's when you hit the lowest point.
Yeah.
But that likely, I don't know, but brought you to the point something had to happen because you could not go down any further other than yourself possibly getting into extreme difficulty or worse, and something had to happen. And so that whatever it was, all of a sudden send you a signal, and things started to change in your body. And then at what point then did you feel that others had maybe similar issues? Because at 22 already, not too far after this happened to you, you started to work with other people and felt that you had an obligation to help others. How did that feel?
There were two things. Yeah. There were two things that happened. So, well, three. Firstly, by the end of 3 weeks, all the psoriasis disappeared. So it was very, like, you could see.
Spontaneously,
and
no medicine.
No medicine. And my back pain also disappeared. And I do have to say, I went back 6 months later to the chiropractor, and he just went, I don't know what you've done, but whatever you've done, keep doing it because this is amazing. So my digestive system took way longer. It was very intertwined with loss and what happened, with me and my grandparents. But I had this crazy experience where I was actually studying writing. So I was trying to get I don't know, we have different words, but kind of like a degree, diploma in being a professional writer. So I was finishing it, and I had to write, I don't know, something to hand in. And there was my husband at the time had a friend that came over, and she was a great writer. And I didn't know her very well. And she said to me, can I have a look at what you've done and maybe I can help you? So we're just chatting and I'm typing and looking at her. And then at one point, and this has never happened to me before, at one point I look at her and all of a sudden it looks like she has a cartoon looking liver above her head. And I'm literally opening and closing my eyes thinking I'm going crazy. And she said to me, do you have something in your eye? And I said to her, well, no, but I've got to ask you a really strange question and I'm very uncomfortable. And she said, that's fine, ask away. And I said, do you have liver problems? And she said, yes, I've had them my whole life. And as she said that, that image of that liver changed. And I could see an older man who was actually, and I knew it was an internal knowing that he was her grandfather and that he'd been in a concentration camp during the war. And I said to her, yeah, this is what I've seen. And she said, yes, that's what happened. And then I said to her, do you get nightmares? And she said, yes. And then I said something that I thought, oh my God, I literally don't know what I'm talking about, because when I was at school, I thought I was going to be a writer, a fiction author, and maybe do acting. I never thought I would have anything to do with the body. So I actually didn't pay any attention to where things were, even in the body or what they were. And I said to her, your issues in your DNA. And 2 years later, she had these tests done, and that's exactly what came out for her. But also, I then told her all this stuff about her family that were very private. And she said to me, I don't know this. I'm going to call my mom. And so she called her mom, and her mom said, yes, all of these things are true. And she was 25 at the time, and I was 21 still. This was weeks after. And she said, and we just stared at each other, and she said to me, I've learned more about my family in the last hour than I've known in my 25 years. And she was like, thank you. And I just sat there and I thought, oh my God, I don't know what I'm going to do with this. How do I live with this? Like, how's this going to happen to me? And so there was a few months there where I would walk down the street and be bombarded by people's health issues and didn't know what to do with it. And then I had a really great idea. And I thought, I'm a person who loves to study and learn. And obviously, because sometimes people say, well, have you done a university degree? And it's like, yes, in writing, which is what I thought that I wanted to do, and in philosophy and all of these stuff, but there was no degree in that type of thing. It's not like I could just go to university and do it. I would have, but it was like, who can I start to learn this from? Because obviously I do need to learn. And I decided, so I started researching all the books and all, and my ex-husband was into this alternative ways of healing. And so I said to him, well, why don't I interview and write magazine articles for people who teach this stuff? And then maybe they'll invite me to their courses. Maybe I learn stuff from them. Let's do win-win, because I really didn't have any money. I didn't have a job. I was studying and going through trauma. And he was like, yeah, let's, let me help you find the right people. And so that's what I did. I started interviewing people and reading their books, asking very, very specific questions. And then a lot of them would have courses, and a lot of them came from the US, I'm going to say, and they would come and travel and do their courses here. And I would attend the courses. But one of the things that was a challenge, I'm going to say, for me, was that I found that I could see these things that were happening. So let's say if we were doing a process that was, like a psychological guided process that they were teaching people at the front, and I would watch it, or a pressure point or anything like that, I could see when it was working and when it wasn't. And so I had a really strong internal conflict, because they were much older than me, much wiser. But a lot of the time I would see that not everything was working and not everything was healthy in terms of what they were teaching. And so I didn't know what to do with that, because, I was so young, and I was like, how do I do this? And so I ended up having an experience, I'm going to say, where I contacted, so I was doing articles for a magazine, and I contacted this magazine after doing quite a few courses. And I said to the editor, can I do some healing on you? And maybe you can give me an ad, in the magazine as a, exchange, because that's what I want. I don't want to be paid. I want to have an ad. And she said, okay, why don't you come and do healing on the 20 people who work here? Because she's like, I feel like that's the right thing to do today. And I went, okay. And I was following protocols that I'd learned from these teachers, because I didn't think that I would know anything. I was 22 at that time. And it started with me doing this on the first 3 people. I mean, I had done healing before. This was not the first time, but I'd never done one like with one person after another. So, it'd be one every few days. And so I started doing it, and internally I could see that the protocols I was using were not healthy for some of this, for, parts of what I was doing with these people. And I had this internal thing where I was like, I'm so young, I don't know what I'm doing myself. But yet, what I've learned already in the last, it was over a year, so I was 22 and a half or something, is not working in the way that it needs to. What if I did what I did with myself? Because essentially I didn't learn something before I had my own healing. What if I tried to listen to their body? What if I was watching and navigating what would happen then? And so I started to do that. And all of a sudden, the results that people were having were completely different. So much more powerful, so much better. I then started doing it with my grandparents as well because they were in pain. And I kind of made a commitment, I'm going to say it in this way, where I was like, I will never stop studying ever, because there's so much to learn and understand about a human being. But I'm also going to watch how this affects people, because I have this ability, for whatever reason I have it. It is to help people, and that's what I'm going to do. And so that's kind of how I, went in this journey of both listening to what I'm being shown, but always studying, always learning more and more.
You have this amazing power, and so to read about it as much as you can, and to then apply what you learned, was really not working for you. When you went back to yourself at one of the worst points and started to look inside of your body, it started to work for you, but became the unknown that you were using. And so then it became a question of saying, I still keep learning or sharing, or at least inputting to me what others experienced, not to change what I'm doing, but to complement it in a way. So give me an example then, in our guest, an example. So when you were doing this with the 22 people initially that you did, give us an example of saying, okay, you wanted to get experience, you had to make some money, so this person said, why don't you look at the people that work here? So, and then you said you tried it the one way, but that really didn't work. Then you applied yours. Give me an example, hypothetically, if you wish, as to what would happen. All of a sudden, you speak to, I'm an employee there, so you talk to me, and then what is the first question, hypothetically?
So, well, the first question would be more, can I tune into you and give you insight on what I'm seeing? And if I don't understand something, can I ask you questions about it? So, and they would say yes.
Yes.
And I would focus on their body, and I would go to the body in a way, show me the starting point. Where do I start? Because what I realized I needed to do was not to follow a protocol, but to create a map for myself to follow of where the person had an issue, or why did the body want to show me that they have an issue. Let's say they said, I have an issue in my stomach, but when I asked the body, I saw that the issue was in the neck.
Exactly.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, I get it now.
So, yeah. So I needed to, rather than go, okay,
you were
here's the protocol.
exploring yourself, not necessarily listening to the person that may say it's here, but it wasn't, it's there. And you would have to explore, and the individual would have to open to you and ask questions that they would respond to, so you could then go further. So go further on this person. He said, my back, and he said, no, it was the neck.
Yeah.
What happens then?
And I would go, well, I wouldn't just say the neck. I would say, well, I'm seeing that the issue is in your neck. Now let me ask some questions around this. So let's talk about what might have happened in your life to cause the issue in the neck. And I would maybe say, so like, for instance, I know the throat is about communication, right? We all know that. That's our voice. Yeah. And so I realized that when people push things away, and we have that saying, pain in the neck, this person's a pain in the neck, then it often connected to relationships where there was a breakdown in communication. And so to me, that was logical and obvious, that the body was showing that. And I would say to the person, let's explore. Let me ask you a question. You have this, there's a blockage in the neck that I'm seeing. And, I want to know if there are people in your life or a particular person where you're having a real struggle in communicating. And usually they would start to, 99.9%, they would say yes. And we would start to kind of explore that. And then what I would do is I would say, again, with their body, in that kind of communication that I had, I would say, okay, show me the next area inside the body where there is that connection. And so it might go to, the mid back, and show me the actual vertebrae, kind of like in my own body. And so I would go to them, okay, well, first, until I learned which vertebrae, I would go, can I, is this part of your back? Can I show you? Do you have some pain? And they'd often go, oh, yeah, when you put some pressure on it, it feels quite uncomfortable. And I would go, okay, again, where is that connected? And maybe it's the stomach. And so I would go, okay, so let's talk about what is it that, again, you're pushing into the back that you're not digesting in your life. So we'd go through this journey with them of all the points that I saw. And then I would go, here is the bigger picture. So this is how things are connected. And this is how it's connected to your own life story, to what actually has happened, to what you've suppressed or not dealt with. Because in my understanding, the body shows us what goes on.
Exactly.
What our stresses are, what our experiences are. And then I would say to them, based on all the things that I learned, and obviously it became bigger and bigger as I, spend more time learning. And I would go, okay, this is, so we're going to do some processes where I'm going to guide you through things where it's a letting go experience. And then I'm going to work with some energy myself and take some of this pain or density out, because I'd learned how to do that. And we're going to work together on this. And then I'm going to ask you to change some things in your life potentially, like healthier boundaries or saying no to things and stuff like that. And it became amazing. And I ended up having, I think what was amazing, John, was that I started having medical professionals come to me. I'm going to be honest, it was a huge amount of nurses. Like, if somebody asked me who were my biggest clients, it was nurses teachers, psychologists, counselors,
Amazing.
and doctors at time. I'm not going to say there was huge amount, but at one point, a doctor actually invited me to work in his clinic, and he was integrative doctor, so he looked at different aspects, like he did acupuncture for people, and he did laser therapy, whatever it was. I don't know, there was a variety of things he tried to balance medication with natural approaches. And he actually said to me, I'd really, here's an office for you, please come and work next door to me, and I'm going to send my clients to you, because I'd done something with his wife, and she'd had a really good result. And he just said, I feel like, I'm really open-minded, and I want to see amazing results with my clients, and so let's work together. And we did for quite a while. So at that point, I was also doing courses, and he was like, hey, everyone who works here, as well as my clients, are going to your courses to understand more about their body and themselves. And it was so profound to have this doctor support me, and send all his clients to me we worked together for like I said, for quite a while.
Now,
And yeah,
still at that point, Ina, you were still very young. So how old would you have been then? Early 20s still?
no, I would have been more like, I think I was already
25, 26?
25, 26.
So because
When I was
then somehow you decided that you should write a book, The Secret Language of Your Body. And have you got a copy of the book there?
Yeah.
So that you can show
I
it to
did.
us? And that is available on Amazon and all the other ones, am I correct?
Yeah.
And it's sold.
Yeah, and the book sold over 1 million copies and won several awards.
And is in 26 languages all around the world. So now I'm
I
an
think there's
author,
even more now.
and I'm an author as well. I have written 5 so far. I'm working on my 6th book. None of them yet has sold 1 million copies, although I believe they all will. I have to say that I have to believe. But I love writing books, but I'm a communicator. That's who I am, and that's what are my books doing. So, but writing books is not easy. And for me, people said to me, oh, you had such an interesting life. You should write a book about it. And, so for 20 years, I started, I stopped, and then about 6 years ago, or 7 years ago, and already in my late 70s, if I don't do it now, it will never happen. So I wrote a book, Against All Odds. And it's not about hurrah, how successful John is, but it's more about all the challenges along the way. So I really loved it, and I enjoyed it. But as I said, writing books is not easy. It's easier now for me because I'm working on my 6th one, but it's not easy. The book, the title, all the other things, the font size, should there be pictures, should there not be pictures, blah, 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 all that kind of stuff. What brought you at a relatively young age to decide to write a book about it, The Secret Language of Your Body, although you already knew you were a good writer, as you said earlier, and when a friend of your former husband or something like that you said was a writer, and she came to your house and to look at some of the writing that you did and the test that you did. So you were already a natural good communicator, means good writer as well. But what brought you then to the point of writing this book? And then I like the title because that's exactly what you're explaining to us. The secret language of your body. That's what your life was all about up to that point. And it was so secret to you until this one day after the chiropractor said to you, I can't do nothing for you. And you were going to either go down or you would emerge into where you are today, known globally, having written the book about it, The Secret Language of Your Body, and now experts in the medical field, psychological field, and all the other things that are specialties are seeking out you. And, because you have proven, and nurses have proven that there is, as you said, the secret of life, wellness, and understanding modern spirituality, a synthesis of the 10-year study of Rudolf Steiner. And obviously you read that, and he's a very well-known individual in that field. And so what brought you to say, I should write that book?
Well, I should say, just to go further back, because I had been studying writing, and at the time, my partner at the time was very supportive. I actually forced him to come and study writing with me, partly because I knew I was going to get pregnant again, and I was really scared not to be supported. So he actually came, and did the courses with me. And we both decided at the time that we were going to kind of self-publish and see what it's like and write a few of our own books. And it started with, after this baby died, with poetry. And so we wrote this book and had a kind of publisher that helped us, but we published it. And then we did a competition with people in my school, I guess in where I was studying. And we published a couple of anthologies for them. I also wrote a play, and that was not published, but it was put on. So I'd had a little bit of experience with books already. And so I always knew I wanted to write. And then what I felt was that I had these clients, and I would always give them a process to do at home. So I would go home, do this, because even if I help you, you need to do your own healing, so to speak, like I did. And what would happen is that come back and I would say, have you done your process? And there would be this smile and going, I lost it. And I can't tell you, Donna, how many people said I lost it. And I literally thought to myself, if I write a book with processes for these different people, they will not have this excuse that they lost the process. And I also felt at the time that there were some books out like this, but very, very basic, like very, very basic information. And I felt like the books that were out were not necessarily written by people who could see and sense what was going on in the body. So I ended up meeting a publisher. My ex-husband, actually, we had a conversation recently. He reminded me, I was also doing a kind of community radio show because I just wanted to learn and interview as many people as I could. And we invited this publisher on the show. And then we talked about, I said to him, look, I think I also met him at a bookshop. I said to him, can I talk to you about my ideas on what I want to write about? And I would have been 26 at the time. And he said, yep, let's have a meeting. And so during that meeting, I talked to him about all different ideas I had. And I had already written another book and wrote a lot down. And he actually said to me, look, Ina, if you took this idea, I was very prepared. and this idea and this one and all of that and put that together, it would be a best-selling book, and I can give you a contract for it in the next few days. And I said, really? Wow, without anything, just, and he said, yeah, because I know it's going to be a bestseller. I will send you the contract because I would love to publish that. And I went, okay, I'll go home and I'll start writing it. And because I had so many notes already on things that I'm very good at taking notes. I went, okay, let me put it all on my computer. And I don't know how, because like you, I have since then, I'm almost finishing well, I guess it would be my 5th book probably. And that particular book, The Secret Language of Your Body, took me exactly a year to write. At the same time, I had two little kids, a husband, and a practice where I was doing things I was seeing clients every day, and I was teaching also on top of it. I have no idea how I did it. I think about it, and I think, how did I do all of that and write that book in 1 year? One of the things I did do when I wrote the book, because I was so young and I was nervous, and everybody was saying it to me, they're like, you're so young, you're so young. I actually sent the book to every medical or health practitioner that I knew was a little bit open-minded. So I'm going to, say that. But, I was like, I'm going to send it to a psychiatrist. I'm going to send it to a psychologist. I'm going to send it to a surgeon, in the US. I'm going to send it to somebody who works, in the cancer ward. I'm going to send it like literally to anybody, chiropractor, physiotherapist, acupuncturist, Chinese medicine practitioner, reflexologist, massage therapist, like everyone that I can think of, some very well-known people. And I'm going to see what they say, because I don't want it published unless they say that they like the book.
Yeah.
And not just like, but actually approve of it. And I was like,
Exactly.
if there are any mistakes, if I've done anything wrong, please tell me.
Right.
And I received, it was like dozens and dozens of, it was something like 100, I think, testimonials and feedback from medical, like it was health practitioners. And I literally cried every time I got it back, because no one said, oh my God, you're too young, this is ridiculous. They said, wow, this is amazing. This is going to help so many people. And even now, I'm constantly meeting doctors who say, I have your book is in my surgery, and I get all my clients to look things up. Even a couple of weeks ago, I was somewhere and this lady said, oh, I've got to introduce you to this doctor. We're creating clinic together. And the first thing he said to me, because she said, we're going to have a shop, he said, you're going to have Ina's book there. And I was like, wow, that is so touching for me, because, doctors are not known usually for being that open-minded. And so when they are, I get so excited. But yeah, it was an amazing experience writing and having that feedback, and then having it published in so many countries, so many languages, I should say.
What I find of you is that you have amazing talents, obviously. I believe in what you are doing. I believe that is possible. I'm a believer. So are many other people, including specialists. But the other comment that I was going to make, you are a very, very good communicator, because that's critical to your success. It's not only that you have skill sets that are unique, but you have to also be a good communicator. That means a good writer and a good speaker, and obviously podcasting is the new media in my mind. that is still on its infancy. And I started about 5-6 years ago, first with blogging and then on a local station, and then about 2.5-3 years ago, started with Podmatch. And since that time, as I said, we're approaching 500 podcasts where I'm the host, and we have over 1 million subscribers on YouTube, and I love it, and it's just exploding now, and that's why I'm so appreciative to have you on my podcast to share with our viewers you in life, but also to introduce to you our guests from around the world to your book, The Secret Language of Your Body. Very good title, by the way, I would suggest. And so the other part is that for all the people watching us, subscribe if you like what we are doing and the guests that we bring on, including obviously Ina Segal, is that subscribe to our podcast, share it with others, like it if you like it. If you have comments, make comments. If you see anything, any podcast that Ina may have or be on, subscribe to hers, but also look at her book is available. Is it on audio as well, Ina?
It is in Canada and the US only at the moment, so it is on audio in those countries.
Yeah, but at the same time, it is and the languages are spoken virtually all over Europe can speak substantially English, and so obviously more books to come. I want to say, I have 5 books, and I would like to send you one of mine. I did a book in particular, but it's close to me, is this one, is that my last book that came out July 31st is about billionaire, but it's not about how to become a billionaire, although you can if you wish, but it's about communication skills. And that is the absolute most important part of life and of studies. It's not being studied well. I believe it's the most important asset that somebody can have interacting with people. And I also share is the lives of 6 or 7 billionaires, how critical communication skills were to all of them. Without that, they would not have become billionaires. And the same applies to me. I'm not a billionaire, but I'm a good communicator, and especially coming from Europe and having spoken dialect in Holland and Dutch, and then having to come to Canada, couldn't speak English, didn't have no soul, didn't have a job, at $25.47, and the dream of building a lumber mill, I did. So what I would like to do is send you at least one of my books. I don't know which one I should send to you, and then I would like to get a book from you that you signed.
Yes.
And
okay.
If you can interact with Scott, Scott will interact with you and let us know which books you would like to get from me for free, and I'll sign them for you, as well. And so, for all our guests watching us, it is you must have the book, The Secret Language of Your Body, not only for yourself, but also for friends that you can use as a present. It is available in audio, in soft copy, or as well at Amazon, and in 26 languages. Ina, it was a privilege and a pleasure to have you on my podcast.
Thank you so much. And, amazing, to get to 1 million people. I was looking at that and I was like, wow, that's very, very inspiring, to have your podcast listened by so many people. So I'm sure you'll get to the dream of selling 1 million books as well. But
I'm a believer, and I am like you. Is what is the foundation of my life is that when I arrived here 60 years ago in July of 1960, with the dream after we were liberated by the Canadian Army, when I was 5 years old, I knew that when I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And so I wanted to start with nothing, but what I had is attitude. I avoid always the negative. Passion, whatever I do, I give it 125%. Work at, I work harder than anybody, even at 85. I'm still getting up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. And so, and then here in Canada, as well as in Australia, compared to what I've seen, what you have lived through your parents and your grandparents, we are, including Australia, Canada, and North America, we are in paradise.
Yeah. And I hope people remember that when they're struggling, how fortunate we are in these particular countries. But I always love Europe. I just love that place so much.
I do too. Ina, we'll stay in touch. Thanks, Nina.
You too. Thank you.